throughout history who have protected our lands, waters, animals, and who continue to do so today. And Democrats and the Council continue to support tribes as they advocate for the United States to uphold treaty and trust responsibilities. As we meet in Chicago, we recognize and honor these traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, also known as the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. So we could not be more thrilled to have you here today. We have a great program lined up. We're going to kick it off with one of my favorite organizers, leaders, and mentors. And then after that, we'll talk a little bit about the amazing work the Council has done and move on. But I do want to say that we have like an amazing speaker list. I'm just going to go back so you can see. It's incredible. And a couple of these people have had to have schedule conflicts, so things will move around a little bit. Bear with me as I juggle slides, and we make sure that you get to hear the important words, thoughts that they have to share with us. Our first speaker today is Ken Martin, and I just have to say, yeah, I already said it. Ken is amazing, but my vice chair, David Green, is going to introduce him, and so I turn over the mic to David Green.
Good afternoon. My name is David Green. I'm vice chair of the council and also vice chair of the Washington State Democrats. And in my role as vice chair of Washington State's Democrats, I work with the other 56 state and territorial parties. And the leader of that organization is Ken Martin, who is the chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. He is also a vice chair of the DNC, and he hails from Minnesota, so he's feeling sort of uppity over the last 3 weeks or so. And I'd like to invite Ken to come spend a few minutes with us. Ken Martin.
Uppity, I like that.
I'm good. Thank you so much, Michelle. How are you?
There you go.
Good to see you. Congrats. Welcome, Democrats. Are you fired up? All right, all right. Look, I am so excited to be here with everyone. Of course, Michelle and David and Allison. I tell you what, we are excited about what Democrats are up to. We got 76 days left to win this. Are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz on November 5th? Okay, good. Well, as David said, I am Ken Martin. I hail from the great state of Minnesota. Our party is the Minnesota DFL, which is the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. We are very unique in that sense, but one thing we recognize is that we are a coalition party. Of course, the Democratic Party is a coalition party, right? And I'll tell you that your voices in this room of making sure that we're lifting up climate and we're lifting up environmental issues is really important. And I want you to continue to push. Continue to push in all of your states. Continue to push the Democrats to center environmental issues in legislation, to center climate in this conversation, the most existential threat we're facing right now, and all of you are frontline warriors to make sure that we're lifting that up. I got to tell you, my old friend and mentor, Paul Wellstone, used to say that we all do better when we all do better, right? And that's important. It's important because the all matters to us as Democrats. When we say all, we mean all. We mean that every person, no matter where they are from, no matter who they love, no matter what their background is, what their socioeconomic level is, every person deserves a champion. Every person deserves a chance to get ahead. And you see, when Vice President Harris and now Governor Walz are talking about their opportunity agenda, that's what they're talking about, right? The idea that people shouldn't just survive in communities throughout this country, but people should thrive. The idea that people shouldn't just have to get by, but they should be able to get ahead. That's where you come in. Because we can't get ahead if we're not taking care of our planet, if we're not taking care of our air, if we're not taking care of our soil and our land and our water. That's the first thing we have to do to make sure that communities can thrive. But let me just say this. I want to tell you a little bit, because I've known Tim for 20 years. Tim's other ethos and how he governs We just won our majority back 2 years ago. Trifecta. And you would think people with a one-seat majority would sit on power. Maybe say, oh, you know, we got to be careful how we govern. Maybe take it slow. Maybe take an incremental approach. Not our governor, not our legislative leaders. What Tim Walz said is power is fleeting. We may never know when we have power again. So let's use the power we have to make the biggest difference for as many people as we can. Let's use the power. What good is banking political power, sitting on power if you're not doing it to improve people's lives and strengthening communities? I got 1 minute left, so I better get to the main meat of this. Let me tell you what Tim Walz did as it relates to environmental issues and as it relates to climate in Minnesota with a one-seat majority. He committed Minnesota to become 100% carbon-free by 2040. Think about that. He's preserving and restoring grasslands and wetlands to store carbon. He invested in green jobs and infrastructure, and he banned forever chemicals with his PFAS legislation. That's what he's doing on climate in Minnesota. We are a climate and environmental leader in Minnesota thanks to Governor Walz. But I'll tell you what, let me just leave you with this. And Jane Klebb over there knows this because she also claims him since he's from Nebraska. But Tim Walz is as authentic as he seems. He's more comfortable in a camo hat and a t-shirt than he is in a suit. He's more comfortable in a fishing boat than he is in the halls of power. He is down to earth. He's a fighter. He's authentic and genuine. And he's going to fight for you along with Kamala Harris. So keep fighting for them. We've got 76 days left. Keep your foot on the gas, everybody. Keep organizing. Keep lifting up voices. Keep fighting for our party. And let's elect Harris Walz on November 5th.
So now that we're all fired up, it's my great honor to introduce attorney, author, and advocate Christine Pelosi, who has served as a prosecutor. Yes, let's hear some claps. And when she talks, you're going to hear about how incredibly important the work that she has done to elevate the issue of climate at the DNC and nationally. She has served as a prosecutor in San Francisco, special counsel in the Clinton-Gore administration, chief of staff on Capitol Hill, and remains counsel for We Said Enough. Pelosi authored Campaign Boot Camp 2.0, so she's very rooted in the kind of grassroots work that many of us are involved in. And based on her leadership trainings, she wrote the Amazon bestseller, The Nancy Pelosi Way. She's been elected to the executive committees of the California Democratic Party, the National Federation of Democratic Women, and the DNC. She co-founded a council at the DNC, like this one, which is near and dear to my heart as a member of military family, the DNC Veterans and Military Families Council. She's authored resolutions on empowering women, campaign finance reform, and climate action. She is a leader in our party and a champion of our cause, and it's great to have you here with us today, Christine. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you all. Thank you, Michelle. If you want to know my advice, in 3 words, follow Jane Klebb. But if you want more words than that, I'll give you more words than that. From my first political campaign, 1968, Ken Martin, I was 2 years old. My mother had 3 of us under age 4, and we were all sharing the same stroller, and she had one of those Hubert Humphrey scarves with all the H's all over it that you Minnesotans might remember. And she was wheeling us around, and we were like, Mom, how did you ever get past those no trespassing signs and no soliciting signs? And she said, I was a mother with babies in a stroller. Who was going to stop me? And the fact is, she was pregnant for most of the 60s. drove carpools for most of the 70s and volunteered until the 80s until she ran for office. So our whole ethic when we were growing up was about public service, but not in terms of running for office. So ironic that she, a shy person, would run for Congress and go from the kitchen to the Congress and ultimately to House Speaker. But I tell that story to say that is the story of this new generation coming up. It's the same things. It's moms and dads in strollers. It's people who've had enough who are just gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna get out and do it. Who's gonna stop me? The only thing that's going to stop me is me. The only thing that's going to stop me is self-doubt. The only thing that's going to stop me is if I internalize the establishment telling me to wait. And so I say this as a third-generation DNC member. Most of the time I've spent, the staff is probably cussing me out right now. That's okay, because I'm constantly pushing and fighting. Why? Because I think it's important for the party to actually stand up for labor, to stand up for workers. That's why I wrote the resolutions on the Fight for 15 months before we were ready to put it in our platform. That's why I've been fighting for climate at the DNC. In 2012, you might remember there was one question on climate asked of Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, and it was a dude on YouTube dressed as a snowman. Okay, that's what they thought of climate. Come on now. So that's why we fought. I fought for, believe it or not, a Green New Deal in 2017 in a resolution after we had lost, and they said you can't use that term because Jill Stein used that term, and I said, but we're going to do it in a different way, because I know people have a problem with the New Deal, because FDR, whom we loved, he ran it through the states, the Jim Crow states, so that meant no black people, no natives, no Asians in some states, no indigenous communities could actually benefit. So we do things differently. We fought, and we created the Climate Crisis Council because we pushed for a climate debate, because we pushed for the issues. We almost had a climate debate, but frankly, one of the sponsors wrote such a heinous homophobic article about Pete Buttigieg. We said, no way, we love our issue, but we love our whole community more. And we're holding back from that. We'll debate it another way. They had working groups. It was in the platform, and we kept fighting Build Back Better, and we ultimately got, go to invest.gov, you'll find out exactly what you got. When we finally got that passed, and people said, well, I don't want to do it for Bernie. I don't want to do it for Joe Manchin. I don't want to do it for Joe Biden. We said, no, do it for the platform. You voted for that platform. Now implement it. So you know what we're going to do this week? We're going to elect formally as our nominees. We're going to send forth Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. We're also going to have the most pro-climate platform, because you're going to write it, you're going to vote for it, you're going to campaign on it, and when we win, you're going to implement it and make the climate better. So for the urgency of our kids demanding that we make change, for your own sense, don't take no for an answer. Take it as an opportunity to make new friends. Keep fighting, keep pushing, because we are going to win. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is really important, and I feel empowering to hear about that history and to remember how far we have come as a country and as a party in addressing the climate crisis. So our next speaker, just making sure that we're queued up to, wonderful. It's my great honor to introduce one of the biggest champions that we have in Congress, Congresswoman Jayapal. I'm going to keep this super short because we need to hear from her. And does she need an introduction? No. Come on, stand up. She is amazing.
Thank you so much, Environmental and Climate Council. How are you all doing? My name is Pramila Jayapal. I represent Washington's 7th Congressional District in the beautiful green state of Washington. On the other, we got Washingtonians in the room. Yes, yes, yes. And I am the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And we have almost 100 members in the Progressive Caucus, and we are about almost half of the Democratic Caucus. And I am just so proud of all of you for really pushing the climate agenda, for pushing the agenda of climate change as an issue that is environmental justice, that is racial justice, that is social justice, that is economic justice, that is climate justice. They are all deeply intertwined, and it matters how we talk about it. And young people across the country have been absolutely critical to making this case and forcing us to take change. And that is just, I cannot say enough how grateful I am for your organizing. And I know it's not just young people, there's people of all generations who understand that we have to organize to save our planet and to save our people. And thanks to you, and thanks to the Congressional Progressive Caucus that held the line over and over and over again when we were sent the very good bipartisan infrastructure bill, which we wanted to pass, but we did not want to leave behind taking on the issue of climate change. And so we insisted that we were not going to pass that bill through the House until we actually got legislation that showed us we would make the biggest investment ever in climate change. And that was that was what led to the Inflation Reduction Act actually getting passed, first written and then passed in the Senate. And with that, I want you to know, because I'm a lifelong organizer, I didn't come to Congress because I wanted to be an elected official, though I am greatly honored to be one. I came to Congress because I believed that we needed to organize on the inside as well as the outside. And that is what we've been doing at the Progressive Caucus, is building our courage muscle to vote as a bloc and to insist on passing real transformative policies. And working with the outside movement, our outside partners who have been so essential to this fight, to make sure that we actually get things done. Thanks to you, we have made the largest investment ever in taking on climate change. Thanks to you, we have an American Climate Corps that will provide tens of thousands of good-paying union jobs protecting our public lands across the country. And thanks to you, we are actually working to continue the work on Justice 40. Justice 40, which is the initiative the Progressive Caucus was absolutely key to making sure was embedded in our legislation, that says that 40% of our investments should go to the communities that are most disproportionately affected by climate change. The neighborhoods that have been torn apart by plants that are spewing emissions and highways that are spewing emissions, kids who are getting asthma because of all of that pollution, making sure that our Native communities are at the table when we are crafting our legislation so that they benefit. That is the work that you have helped us to accomplish. And when we elect, and I'm saying when, not if, I'm saying when we elect Vice President Kamala Harris to be our next president and Governor Tim Walz to be our next vice president, and we take back the House, because we need to take back the House, and we keep the Senate, we have more work to do to make sure that we bring forward justice for every single community, that young people have a planet that you can depend on, that you can pass on to your children, that we have a world that honors our planet and our people. And I am grateful to you for making that happen. So let's get it done. Let's go door knock. Let's go organize. Let's make it happen. Thank you all so much.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Jayapal. Look, none of us ever has or will forget the courage and resolve of Representative Justin Pearson, the Tennessee state representative who was one of the 3 state reps who stood up for a common sense gun legislation in the Tennessee legislature after a 2023 mass shooting at a school left 6 people dead, 3 of them 9 years old. And what did the Republicans in control do? They expelled him. Then they backed down, and Pearson, a community organizer, a servant leader, ran again, and he easily won. Pearson ran for the office again, handily winning back the seat in August of 2023 with, how much of the vote you think he got? 70, 80, 94% of the vote. Pretty resounding, right? His advocacy and leadership inspired the Sierra Club to recognize him as the 2023 National Changemaker of the Year, and boy did he deserve it. And the Root declared him one of the 100 most influential Black Americans in 2022. Inspiring, stalwart, so very, very glad that he is here. Let's give him a warm welcome.
There we go. How y'all doing? Y'all look beautiful. Look back home in District 86, we start every rally the same way. And I just got to confirm, this is a rally, right? A rally for our environment, a rally for our climate, a rally for our planet and our future. Am I right? We start every way. I say one thing and then you say another. It's called call and response, like the black church. You with me? So I'll say, who fired up? And then you say, we fired up. You ready? Who fired up? Who fired up? Who fired up? Who fired up? Yes, we are fired up. We're fired up because we've got to be for such a time as this. We've got to be fired up when there's an assault on our freedoms. We've got to be fired up when there's somebody running for president of the United States who's talking about if the billionaires give him enough money, he'll destroy the entire planet. We've got to be fired up for such a time as this because we've got somebody on our side who is the most qualified person ever to run for president of these United States, Kamala D. Harris, and we are fired up to get her to the White House to swear that sacred oath on January 20th, 2025. We are fired up because we know what's at stake. And I am grateful to each and every one of you, to Chairwoman Dietrich, this entire council, Vice President Harris and her team, to my team who is here, my family, my fiance and our Chief of Staff, Oceanae Argillium. Thank you. Y'all give her a round of applause. That's my baby and my best friend. Give her a real one. Give her a real one. Hardest working person I know. She started law school on Monday and had to skip the rest to be here with us because this movement is so strong and we have to keep this work going. Let's be honest about the problems that we have, talk shortly about what we can do about it, and then I'll be out of your way. I am indeed the son of a teacher and a preacher, but I won't hold you long. We are living in a moment and a time where the existential crises of our climate and the injustices that have perpetuated in our environment, particularly for black folk and poor white folk, and for indigenous communities and for rural communities, have for too often and too long been overlooked and dismissed. And we are dealing with the crisis now simply because 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when these plants were being placed into certain communities, certain people didn't speak up. If the same folk who throw in ketchup on paintings were paying attention to where the polluters were being placed 50, 60, and 70 years ago, we wouldn't be dealing with the climate crisis that we're dealing with now. What does this mean for us if we pay attention to the people and the places that are oftentimes overlooked and underinvested in and not listened to? If we go into those cities, if we go into those counties, if we go into those communities, knowing that transformation is necessary through community power, and we use our power, our social location, and join forces together, we disrupt a status quo that hurts and harms the most marginalized, that hurts and harms those who have been made poor, and that hurts and that harms those who are already disproportionately dying from the polluters being put in their communities. Okay, somebody, y'all gonna catch this in 1 second, but give me a timeout. Let me thank Jane Klebb and Senator McKinney from Nebraska. Y'all, Nebraska, my second home. Nebraska is my second home, and Jane Klebb is one of the best pipeline fighters and energy makers and supporters that I know. I live in Westwood of Memphis, Tennessee. My family has been in Tennessee for 7 generations. And what we know is that in our community, we were redlined. We were forced to live there, and the factories built plants around the community. It has been decisions by policymakers and people that have perpetuated the pain that we, as a movement for justice, have to resolve. And when our community was faced with 2 multi-billion-dollar corporations trying to build the Byhalia pipeline through our neighborhood, they tried to destroy our drinking water, they took folks' land through eminent domain, we stood up. And we built a movement of black folks and white folks, of rich folks and poor folks, of people who didn't think it was their problem and people who knew it was their problem. We built what Heather McGhee calls the solidarity dividend. And what do we know when we fight? We win, and we defeated 2 multi-billion-dollar corporations, Valero Energy Corporation and Plains All American. We can do this. When we use our God hands, when we use our God feet, when we show up and give the best of our service to save what we know is sacred. And what we know about this election is that Vice President Harris's name is at the top of the ticket. We've got to get Governor Walz in there as Vice President. But what is also on the ballot are amazing candidates like Gloria Johnson and Tony Vargas and others. But also are our issues. Our issues are on the ballot. On the ballot in this election is whether or not we will have access to clean air for everybody. What's on the ballot is whether or not we'll ensure clean water for everybody, no matter where they live in our country. What's on the ballot is whether or not we'll have clean soil to plant in. What's on the ballot is whether kids will no longer die from asthma on our watch because of the pollution that they have. What is on the ballot is whether or not we will end the pipelines that are being built across our cities and across our counties and across our states. What's on the ballot is whether or not we will have a climate and an environment that is just. And I know one thing about it. When we go to the ballot box, when we show up at the ballot box, we will be fighting not just for ourselves, but for our futures. And when we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. God bless you.
You know, Democrats, we are lucky. We have some amazing leaders, and my heart is full. I've got like shivers going up and down my back. This has been important and rousing, and I'm feeling ready after the end of this meeting to go out and knock some doors. So it is my great honor to introduce Congressman Raskin. And, you know, Congressman Raskin has been an ally of our movement, has championed our movement, supported many major pieces of legislation to address the climate crisis, and stood up to climate-denying colleagues on the other side of the aisle. He has been key in putting together the largest piece of climate legislation ever to pass Congress, and works tirelessly to put Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the White House. We are incredibly lucky to have him in Congress, and we are incredibly lucky to have him here today. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Raskin. Yeah.
Hey, you guys. Hello, Climate Council. What a thrill to be with you guys. I was just thinking we're all here as true blue Democrats, but I thought I would start my brief remarks on a bipartisan note by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, you know? And if we had that, we'd be able to confront the climate crisis in a far more effective way. I don't know if you read this book by Jared Diamond called Collapse, but he studied the history of civilizations collapsing. And one of the key signs of collapsing in a civilization is that you get a small sector, a special interest within a society, which captures power over everybody else and then operates in its own interests against the interests of the entire society. And that's where we've come with big gas and big oil and big coal. They're operating in their own interests and not in the interests of the whole American society. So, Donald Trump is their loyal, faithful servant. And, you know, he tweeted out, climate change is a hoax perpetrated on the American people by China. And I tweeted back, no, Donald Trump is a hoax perpetrated on the American people by Russia. Climate change is real. You know how you can tell it's real? They're not denying it so much anymore. They just don't want to talk about it, right? They just don't want to mention it. Record drought, record forest fires, record ocean rise. All over the world, record levels of climate refugees all over the world. There's mosquitoes in the North Pole this summer. The hottest year on record last year. The hottest year on record before that, the year before that. The hottest record, the hottest year on record before that, the one before that. You get the picture. This year will be the hottest year on record when we get to next year. And yet, we're up against a whole corporate bureaucracy of denial. And the Republican Party, which now operates, of course, like an authoritarian cult of personality, continues to serve the interests of big gas and big oil in denying the reality of where we are. Therefore, we need to defeat all of the authoritarians, the autocrats in Moscow. We got to defeat the kleptocrats and the plutocrats in Mar-a-Lago. We got to defeat the theocrats in MAGA. And who's going to do it? The Democrats are going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to stand for the people. You know, sometimes, all right, I'll tell one more story. I didn't realize that. Okay, I'm on a strict time limit here. I'm operating on sleep deprivation, okay? So, but I just, sometimes they cannot correctly pronounce the name of our party in its adjectival form. You know, I'll be up there. I was there with Lauren Doney. You can look this one up on YouTube. And, you know, they'll hear Nancy Pelosi speak. Okay, so you know what? You know what? If you want to address any problem in America, around the world, the Democrats are going to do it. Okay, not Robert Kennedy, not Donald Trump. You know, if you want to, go. You know what? If you want to show some political courage, go and interrupt one of Donald Trump's rallies, all right? Because right here we're organizing against Trump. We're organizing against the reactionary autocrats, plutocrats, and kleptocrats. Anybody who interferes with that is objectively helping Donald Trump and Tim Walz. So cut it out. Just cut it out. Anyway, I'll close with this thought. They can't pronounce the name of our party in its adjectival form. It's always that Democrat Congresswoman and that Democrat bill. And for 7 years I sat there and I said, you know what? Democrat is the noun, okay? Democratic is the adjective. You gotta You got to say the Democratic Congresswoman or the Democratic bill or the Democratic amendment. And so I got mad at Lauren Boebert that day. And I said, you know, you guys have this self-created, self-imposed political speech impediment when it comes to our party. And now it's contagious. It's coming over to my side. Now whenever I try to say the name of your party, it just comes out the Banana Republican Party and the Banana Republican Congresswoman. And so I went home and I told my wife, I said, I finally got them back after 7 years. I was very proud of myself. You know what she said? She said that was an extremely immature response. And so luckily I was reading this great book by H.W. Brands, the University of Texas historian, about Franklin Roosevelt. I learned something remarkable from that book. FDR did not call our party the Democratic Party, much less the Democrat Party. He called our party with a capital D, check it out, the democracy. The democracy, okay? He used to say the economic royalists and the plutocrats say you invest in the wealthiest people in America, and then some of the wealth will just dribble down magically on everybody else. But the Democracy Party, he said, says you invest in the great American working middle class, and then we will all rise and prosper together. That's the doctrine of the democracy, said Roosevelt. So the democracy is going to save us from authoritarians and the autocrats and the plutocrats and the petrocrats, and it's going to save us from climate change. Democracy, government of, by, and for the people. Thank you very much.
Well, as a former English teacher, I definitely enjoyed that part of the speech and all of it. That was amazing. Thank you so, so much, Congressman Raskin. So I am really excited about our next speaker. Look, we all know Vice President Harris is a climate champion, an unapologetic climate champion. She's an environmental leader, and when we elect her president, she's going to tackle the climate crisis with the scale and scope needed. Well, today we are joined by someone who is helping to make that possible, Ike Irby. Dr. Irby is a senior advisor to Vice President Harris on the Harris for President campaign. Scientist by training, Ike most recently served in the Biden-Harris administration as special assistant to the president and deputy domestic policy advisor and chief climate advisor to the vice president. And we are so, so fortunate to have him here today. Please join me. Give him a big applause.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today with all of you. As Michelle noted, I am Senior Advisor to Vice President Harris and have been an advisor for her since 2017 when I started as her Climate, Energy, and Environment Advisor in the Senate. It's so good to be here at the DNC convention in a room full of people committed to a future where clean air and clean water are a right for all and not just those who can afford it. A future where we build an opportunity economy that lifts all communities and powers the dreams, ambitions, and aspirations of all Americans. Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz are committed to bold action to build a clean energy economy, create good jobs, ensure America's energy security, reduce emissions, protect public health, support communities in the face of climate disasters, and hold polluters accountable. As District Attorney, Vice President Harris established one of the first environmental justice units in the nation. As Attorney General, she won millions in settlements against big oil and fought alongside communities simply calling for cleaner air. As Senator, she held the Trump administration to account for dismantling our environmental and public health protections, and as Vice President, she cast the tie-breaking vote to pass the largest investment in climate action in history. This historic work is lowering energy costs, creating hundreds of thousands of high-quality jobs, bolstering our energy security and independence, and ensuring America leads the clean energy economy. Over the last 3 years, Vice President Harris has worked alongside President Biden to expand protections for public lands, make historic investments in clean water, clean transportation, and resilience, advance environmental justice, and harness the power of America's future leaders by establishing the American Climate Corps. Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are fully committed to building upon this progress. But I want to share with you today is a glimpse behind the scenes at how Vice President Harris approaches and thinks about these issues. Whether it's in preparation for a visit to Lake Mead to discuss drought resilience, or a meeting with young climate leaders in Florida talking about their climate anxiety, or sitting down in her West Wing office with Administrator Regan to strategize how to get capital for clean energy projects to business owners and communities often locked out of traditional financing mechanisms. The Vice President, in every briefing, in every discussion, and in every decision, is intentional about asking how our policies will impact individuals and then taking the next step of asking who we have not thought about, who is not in the room or at the table, or even aware that this discussion is happening at all. Who are we designing policy for? And how does this policy intersect with our broader work? Take the issue of lead pipes. Without the Vice President, we would not be able to say that we are on track to remove every lead pipe in America. But when you hear our Vice President talk about this work, it is not just about infrastructure. It is about public health. It is about education so that our children can learn without brain damage from lead poisoning. It is about understanding the intergenerational impacts that policies like redlining have had. And it is about the government's role in meeting the cries for help from communities who have been fighting to remove lead pipes for generations. When the Vice President approaches an issue, it is not just an intellectual exercise devoid of context and reality. It is grounded in impact, compassion, and intentionality. That is why I've been so proud to support the Vice President over these last 7 years as we fight for a better future for all. I want to close by paraphrasing what Vice President Harris said last year at COP28 as she delivered the U.S. Statement. For as much as we have accomplished, there is still much more work to do, and continued progress will not be possible without a fight. We know there are those who seek to slow or stop our progress, leaders who deny climate science, delay climate action, and spread misinformation. But in the face of their resistance and in the context of this moment, we must do more. So now, DNC Environment and Climate Council, I ask you, are you ready to put in that work in the face of this resistance? We are the underdogs, and there are powerful forces out there that do not want us to win. We have 76 days to get this done and elect our next president, Kamala Harris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Irby. It's nice to get sort of look a little bit behind the scenes, and you know, part of great leadership is picking great advisors. And I know from my experience, I'm honored to have some experience interacting with Dr. Irby, that he's an amazing, wonderful advisor, and I feel so good about his being part of what's going to happen for the next 4 years, building on the historic accomplishments of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. Yeah, they're pretty awesome, pretty amazing. So we have a great remaining program lined up. I'm just going to highlight things. We have Senators Markey and Merkley are on their way here. Congressman Frost. We have new polling that will be presented by Daniel Diceroth of Data for Progress about climate voters. We have an amazing panel on climate being a winning issue for Democrats. It's really important. We're going to end with a group photo, so please stick around. We want to show how strong we are as climate voters and the strength and growing strength of the climate movement in this country. And I want to take just a few minutes to talk about the council and the work that we're doing. So we've moved things around in the agenda, in the program a little bit, so I'm going to kind of find my way there. And first, I wanted to say that all the work the council does that I'm going to describe to you would be completely impossible without our amazing team. And I want to acknowledge our Vice Chair, David Green, who's also the Vice Chair of Washington State Democrats, and a founding member of this council. Council Secretary and Director of Black Engagement, Dr. Allison Stevens, also a Nevada DNC committee woman. Any Nevadans here? It's here, cheer. Director of Native Engagement and North Dakota DNC member Ruth Anna Buffalo. and Director of AAPI Engagement, and a longtime supporter and member of this council, Howard Cho from Colorado. We also have a Youth Engagement Director, Paul Pressendew, who could not be here, but he's absolutely crucial, and we have youth at the table. It's so important. So as a council, we rely also on a team of volunteers and an advisory board with expertise from mental health, public health, the faith community, and more. And some of the members, I think, are here today. They were on Monday. We have Ron Meehan from Alaska. Stand up if I call your name. There's Ron. Thank you. Igor Trugub from California. Lake Liao from Michigan. And we also have some of the chairs of our state Democratic environmental caucuses, states and territories. And that includes, Dems Abroad. So we've got the chair of the Dems Abroad Environmental Caucus, Dana Frelling. Iowa Democratic Environmental Caucus, Rob Hogue is here. Who else is here? Please stand up. I'd like to recognize you. Vita Canitz from Minnesota, my neighbor state. Thank you. And R.L. Miller from California. Yeah. We are in 25 states with state organizations. We have over 50 local organizations, and we are growing. So I am really proud to be working with this growing coalition. And I also want to thank the staff and volunteers who've made this day possible. Tyleek Mamillan over there, and Maggie Van Heemst is, let's hear it for Tyleek. And for Maggie, she's watching. The council launched in 2020 to elevate and empower those most impacted by the climate crisis, along with environmental leaders and activists in all 57 states and territories, and to further the party's commitment to protect our environment and tackle the climate crisis, and to elect Democrats. Because the Democratic Party is the party of climate solutions. In 2023, we held or participated in more than 35 events from DC to Minnesota, from Pennsylvania to Michigan to Alaska, including state Democratic Party environmental meetings, events at the White House and the Vice President's residence, and packed enthusiastic meetings like this one in St. Louis. Anyone here from Missouri? You hosted a really great DNC meeting. Thank you. And in 2024, we are doubling down. We've held more than 30 events already, co-sponsored a presidential campaign fundraiser, and continue our advocacy to end fossil fuel subsidies, because no reason we should be subsidizing, folks that are using our skies as open sewers. So we held our third annual Netroots Nation panel, a conversation about how to engage younger voters on climate. And this election year, we continue to tour the country in person and virtually, holding events in red states, blue states, purple states, I don't know, any other colors. Is Alaska a white state or snowy state? So climate is on the ballot in 2024 in every election. And a significant part of our work is organized by these state Democratic Party environmental caucuses that we've had some of the representatives, some of the leaders stood up. And it's Democratic Environmental Network. We affectionately call it DEN for short. And you can see here the states that we're in, the states we're organizing, and the national organizations. Really proud that recent launches have been in Iowa, in DC. High school Democrats have an environmental caucus, which is really awesome. Yeah, a way to get involved from the beginning about an issue they care deeply about. During our Earth Month 2024 mobilization, we supported and publicized more than 30 Democratic environmental events across the country. Our distributed events map, you should go to our website, dncclimate.org, and bookmark it. It provides support for Democratic climate events, outreach to drive visibility and attendance. We're glad to post yours. We're glad to do outreach to support it. Your events. We offer messaging assistance to state groups and parties to help win on climate. So again, please sign up now. Go to dncclimate.org, and if you are interested in getting the slides that will be presented later on climate messaging and polling, you sign up for our newsletter, you will get them. We don't do fundraising, so just really great newsletters a couple times a month. And please connect with us on social media as well. So I could not be more thrilled now to introduce someone who has been such an important leader for all of us. And I'm going to find the slide. There we go. Wondering who is it? You have to see where I stop on the slides. Oh. There we go. Anyone from Oregon here? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm absolutely, whoops. Okay, well, do you want to come up and find the slide for me? Yeah, just slide. Okay. We're going to go back to the end, sorry. This is for the sake of those who are online or watching with closed captions. It's just really important to get that right when we can. So, apologies. So, Senator Merkley was raised in a union family in Oregon. First in his family to graduate from college, he lives in the blue-collar neighborhood that he grew up in, but he sees opportunity for working Americans slipping away as the powerful rig America's politics and economy. He fights for people who need a chance. He's about justice. He's about equity. He is leading fights to protect voting rights, kick hedge funds out of the housing market, secure fairer drug prices, reform the filibuster, and hold corporate polluters accountable. And every day, he takes on the powerful, trying to and working hard to create a better future for us all. And I'm so glad to welcome Senator Merkley.
Hey, greetings, everybody. There's perhaps no issue that more poses a powerful versus the people than the climate. And so I thought, because we're doing 4-minute increments here, I would just share 2 positive things and 5 hard facts that we're going to have to overcome if we tackle climate change. And I can tell you I've been immersed in this fight for now 26 years, 10 years in the Oregon legislature, 16 years in the U.S. Senate. There's nothing easy about that. But let's take out a couple of positive things. The first is that the United States has cut its carbon emissions by 20% since 2005. There aren't that many favorable things, so let's just say thank you, this is good. The second thing is that we did pass the IRA as a whole series of ways to promote renewable energy and to convert the use of energy from fossil vehicles and fossil heating to renewable vehicles, renewable heating, and that's positive. So that's good. IRA, a big victory. My third positive thing is that the formula for tackling climate change is not that complicated. It's electrify everything with renewable energy. That's simple. That's all we have to do. Okay, but there are a bunch of hard facts that we have to grapple with. First hard fact is that we have been woefully inadequate in addressing carbon in the atmosphere. Back when I was born, it was going up 1 part per million per year. Back 26 years ago, when I was in the Oregon State Legislature, it was going up 2 parts per million. Now it's going up 3 parts per million. Do you get the point? That when we need to be actually going down, we're not only going up, we're going up faster and faster across the world. It's an elliptical upward curve. This is a path to climate catastrophe, and the ultimate arbiter about how we're doing is to measure the carbon in the atmosphere, and we are failing right now. So that's the hard fact, that we have been operating in a woefully inadequate way as humanity. Second of all, anytime you hear the words all of the above, you're part of the problem. Now, folks like to say, well, if we just produce more renewables and a few more electric cars and a few more heat pumps, won't this solve the problem? The answer is no. As long as we are increasing fossil infrastructure, taking more fossils out of the ground, we are burning more fossils, that's more carbon in the air. So think about all of the increases in fossil infrastructure that happened under both Democratic and Republican administrations. There's nothing close to keeping the ground. Keeping the ground is a phrase I was striving to popularize a decade ago. You probably have heard it before, but can you just try those words? Keep it in the ground, ready? Keep it in the ground. All right, so I see 1 minute left. All right, so I've got more challenges here. The third is fossil gas is not a bridge. If fossil gas is worse than local coal, if you're transporting it through LNG, it's equal to local coal if you're not. Yes, it's cleaner in particulate matter, but in climate terms, it's not. And so all of those stories about a bridge to a renewable future and so forth, they are false. Fossil gas, please call it fossil gas. Call it methane. Do not call it natural gas. There's nothing natural about pulling it out of the ground and killing our planet. The fourth hard fact, solving this problem takes United States leadership. We have to have the power example. We don't have the power example if we're continuing to build more fossil infrastructure. United States has to be a key to this. We are the largest footprint per person among the developed world. Our average is 16 tons per person per year. The global average is 4. We have to have the power of our example, and that means all of the above has to be tossed out. Keep it in the ground has to be our mantra. And so finally, we have to reform the filibuster, because in a democracy, the fossil fuel world has so much power because they have so much money. 1% of their net profits is $3 billion a year invested in our political system. They can buy our democracy. We have to change the rules. In the Senate, that means we must end the minority Republican veto that stops us from doing good policy. We had 48 votes to do that. We need 50. That means we have to have 50 blue states to have any chance. We have to elect Kamala Harris. We have to take the House. We have to take the Senate. That means winning every swing seat. And let's get it done. So it starts with the effort and energy that we're creating right here during this week. You're part of history. Let's make the pivot. Save America. Save the planet. God bless you all.
We are addressing technical issues. We will be back shortly. Going to lower the microphone. The first member of Generation Z to be elected to Congress, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, is proud to represent the people of Central Florida. Yeah. Lots of people love Florida, live Florida. As a young member of Congress and Afro-Latino, Congressman Frost brings a fresh, progressive perspective to an institution that was formerly out of reach for young, working, Black, and Latino Americans. Now, as a freshman member, Frost has been appointed to the powerful Committee on Oversight and Accountability, where he will deliver and is delivering on his mission of ushering justice and transparency to Floridians while fighting against House Republicans' extremist attempts to politicize the work of the committee by attacking democracy and promoting ridiculous MAGA conspiracies. In Congress, Frost is committed to representing the people of his hometown in Orlando and Central Florida and being their voice in Washington, D.C. He's laser-focused on working to deliver change and results on issues of housing affordability, health care, abortion rights, LGBTQ+ rights, voting rights, climate change, and more. He is a rising star in our party, and I couldn't be more proud to have him here. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman Frost.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. How's everybody doing? Well, it is so good to be here today, and I appreciate the introduction. I'm Congressman Maxwell Frost. I am proud to be from the great state of Florida. I'm a Florida man, through and through. Well, listen, y'all, I'm going to be pretty brief, but I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the coalition and what it means to organize around the climate crisis. I'm actually excited about the opportunity and ability to look within this struggle and figure out how we can atone for the wrongs done to marginalized communities across this country as we fight this existential threat. That we know that the cost of doing nothing is far greater than the cost of taking bold action right now. I want to tell you, I come from a state that is a frontline community in the climate crisis. Many of you know right now, the water surrounding the state of Florida is the temperature of a hot tub. That hot water is fuel for hurricanes. Hurricanes now are lasting longer, creating more destruction, killing more people, and displacing more people. My district of Orlando, Florida, received hundreds of thousands of people from the island of Puerto Rico. After Hurricane Maria, those folks had to move to Florida. Those folks are the largest group of climate refugees to move to this country. Not just that, but extreme heat is killing more people than ever before. We are experiencing some of the hottest, not just summers, we used to just as hot as summers, hottest time periods that we ever have. Did you know that extreme heat is killing more people than hurricanes and tornadoes combined? I'm grateful to Secretary of Labor Julie Su. They're right now involved in a rulemaking process to provide complete federal preemption of all of these damn states like Florida that took away the heat protections. Can you believe that in the state of Florida? Yeah. Can you believe that in the state of Florida right now, they passed a law that said that these companies or that said that cities cannot institute heat protections for their workers? A damn bottle of water. Shade. What I would say is the minimum you need to do as an employer to protect your workers because of the failure and inaction of politicians to get the climate crisis under wraps. But I'll tell you, because all of this is going on in my state right now, for the first time, there are people I've never met before, people that I disagree with on a lot of things that are coming out of the woodwork, coming up to me, coming up to organizations and saying, Maxwell, I'm a conservative, but I'm a business owner, and these hurricanes are hurting my wallet. What can we do about the climate crisis? I mean, it's a damn shame it takes hitting your wallet to care about the existential threat of humanity. But I want to end with this. More people are joining this movement right now because the climate crisis isn't coming, it is here. And we got to make sure we're ready as a movement to bring these folks in, to broaden this coalition. And so my ask of everyone here is, as we go back to our homes on Friday, let's go out in our communities. Let's go into these marginalized communities filled with workers who are working in these hot suns and this extreme weather. Bring them into this movement so we can tell the true story of this country and how we must come together to save this planet and to save humanity. Does that sound good, y'all? All right. Well, hey, thank you so much. It's good to be here. God bless you. And let's save this planet. Thank you.
All right. We're going from Florida back up to Massachusetts. So if I can find the right slide here. So it is, you know, when I wrote and thought about this introduction, I started out with 3 pages. I don't have 3 pages any longer, but that gives you an idea of just how amazing and important the leadership of Senator Ed Markey is. You know that, I know that. You just can't imagine the recent successes in climate legislation without him. His leadership has been long and unwavering. He's a national leader on energy, environmental protection, climate policy, has a prolific legislative record on protecting our planet. He's the Senate co-author of the Green New Deal resolution with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a 10-year mobilization to transform our economy and democracy, all the while addressing climate change and creating millions of new jobs. He's the House author of the 2007 Fuel Economy Law, one of the most impactful global warming reduction policies in our history. When we think about the carbon emissions starting to edge down, you know, we can look and see that's something that Democrats did. That's something that we've done. Our leaders are making it happen, and we are making it happen. He's the author of the Appliance Efficiency Act of 1987, stopped the construction of hundreds of coal-fired plants. Yes. Last year, he secured $20 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act to create a national climate bank, something I know will resonate in this room where some of you are working on green banks and know how important it is to get the money where it's needed to make the changes necessary. This spring, I had the privilege of being with him and President Biden on Earth Day for the launch of the American Climate Corps. And really, I mean, obviously I started with 3 pages. I'm not exaggerating. This feels inadequate, the scope and scale of what he's done and his contributions, you know, to the legislation and also to changing the national conversation around climate change and around environmental justice are historic and invaluable. So let's give him big applause. So glad that he's here. You can tell I'm a fan.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for your incredible leadership. And this is just a wonderful moment of optimism, of urgency for all of us to be together who care about climate. Move over solar, move over wind, because this gathering today is the greatest renewable energy, renewable political resource we have in the country in 2024, because this gathering is going to mobilize to save our planet. So we thank all of you. We thank you, Michelle, for your amazing movement work over many, many years. We thank you for everything that you do. And to all of the distinguished speakers who have gathered here today, a Mount Rushmore of climate leaders in our country, we can't thank all of you enough, or as Donald Trump would call all of the speakers, a clear and present danger to the oil, gas, and coal industry. Okay? Another way of describing this gathering here today. Senator Mark Pacheco, my good friend, the leader up in the Massachusetts State Legislature on these issues, and to all of you who are gathered here, because Trump does know that while climate change is an existential threat to our planet, all of the climate and clean energy laws that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have put on the books are an existential threat to the future of the fossil fuel industry in the United States and across our planet. And we know that Vice President Kamala Harris is a climate champion. Together, she and I launched, as Michelle said, the National Climate Bank to invest $27 billion that's going to unleash $120 billion worth of private sector investment targeted towards vulnerable communities in our country. Half of the funding has to go to black and brown and disadvantaged communities. We have to be intentional. We have to say what the problem is that historically has gone unremediated, and that's what the Climate Bank legislation said. And the same thing is true for the American Climate Corps. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and I introduced the Civilian Climate Corps in 2021, and we could not get it into the IRA, but President Biden called us in April and said, come with me down to Virginia to a Civilian Conservation Corps facility from the 1930s, and I'm going to announce with you and Alexandria on either side of me, the American Climate Corps of 20,000 young people who will be able to go out into their communities to be able to work to remediate the historic injustice. And just to give you an idea of the size, the Peace Corps is 8,000 young people. The Climate Corps, 20,000, half of whom have to be black and brown and from the affected, disadvantaged communities in our country. We have to be intentional. We have to be specific. We have to know what it is that is the problem. And what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done is to make sure that the IRA is pointing these clean energy jobs towards union jobs, high-paying union jobs. And do you know who prosecuted and collected billions of dollars from oil companies and from corporate polluters as Attorney General? Kamala Harris. Do you know who secured $20 billion for homeowners during the foreclosure crisis? Kamala Harris. And do you know who cast the tie-breaking vote 2 years ago to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, otherwise known as the biggest climate bill ever passed in the history of the world? Kamala Harris. She broke the tie. And while she was helping to grow our clean energy economy, to stand up for jobs and justice, she's taken on the Billionaire Boys Club, which is the Heritage Foundation, which is all those billionaires who are going to give $1 billion to Donald Trump to take all of the wind and solar and all-electric vehicle and battery storage technology subsidies off the books. And you know what our message to them is? We know you're not going to stop trying. We're not going to stop trying. We're going to go into this election because we know that Donald Trump wants to make America great again by making America hate again. And we know if he gets elected, clean energy investments, clean water, clean air protections are gone. The Paris Climate Agreement, gone. Tax breaks for wind and solar, all-electric vehicles, gone. Under Trump and Republicans, the IRA is DOA. So we have a choice. Are we going to fight? Are we going to stand up? Are we going to stand by Kamala? Are we going to make sure that she becomes the greatest climate president in the history of our country? Let's go, stand and fight. Let's get this done for our country and for the planet. You are the leaders. This is the time. This is the place. We must get this done. Thank you all so much.
Wow, and so much more that's wonderful to come. You know, the father, we're going to go to a presentation, a data presentation in just a minute on new polling. But after that, we have the father of the environmental justice movement is here. Dr. Robert Bullard is going to be speaking. Gina McCarthy is going to be speaking. We have just an incredible lineup. And so we're going to go now to Daniel Diceroth, a longtime friend of this council, the executive director of polling from Data for Progress, and who started there in climate environmental polling before she became the director. I follow their polling. I've got that bookmarked on my desk. You should. It's about climate. It's about other progressive issues. It's about housing. It's about voting, about democracy, and so often addresses issues that are key to the electorate. So few people have done more to understand how our issue, climate and environmental justice, is a voting issue than Danielle. And every time she speaks, I learn something new. Welcome, Danielle. I will bring up the slides for you. We're all over the place. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you so much for having me here today and to be among such incredible climate leaders. It's such an honor to be here. So, hi, my name is Danielle Diceroth. I'm the executive director at Data for Progress, and I'm excited to share with you new research that we've conducted this summer on climate change and the 2024 election. So just to level set with everyone, according to the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications, the share of Americans who have grown alarmed or concerned about climate change over the past decade has risen sharply. And what we find in our research is that about 3/4 of voters are at least somewhat familiar with the topic of climate change, and just over half say the same about environmental justice. And voters are learning about these topics primarily from the news, but also from witnessing, seeing, or hearing about extreme weather events, from talking to people they know, and from seeing posts on social media. Looking back at 2020, climate change was a major issue, especially for voters who supported President Biden. Just over 2/3 of Biden voters, according to the Pew Research Center, said climate change was very important to their vote in 2020. And researchers from Tufts University found that climate change and the environment was one of the top issues for young voters in 2020. Now, in 2024, we find that almost a third of voters say that climate change is more important to their vote this year than it was in 2020. And this is especially true for Democrats, young voters, and Latino voters. Just to really underscore this point, only 28% of all voters say that a candidate's stance on climate change is not at all important to their vote, compared to over half who say it is an important factor, and 14% of voters who say that climate change is a deal breaker on whether or not they will support a candidate. Now, what do voters know about Vice President Harris's plans to address climate change? Well, we find that almost half of voters have a positive view of Vice President Harris's plans, and that number skyrockets to almost 2/3 when we look at voters who say they've heard at least some about her plans. And this underscores the importance of communicating Vice President Harris's record to voters over these next few months. With our partners at Climate Power, we've found that Vice President Harris's record and actions on climate change throughout her career enjoy widespread bipartisan support. Voters are especially excited about Vice President Harris's longstanding efforts to curb air and water pollution and hold big polluters accountable. The record between Vice President Harris and Donald Trump on climate change could not be more different. And voters strongly agree with Harris's views about holding big polluters accountable, compared to few who agree with Donald Trump's statements about drill baby drill and denying climate change. Moreover, over half of voters agree with Vice President Harris's views that Donald Trump is in the pocket of big oil, whereas very few agree with Donald Trump's statements that the quote-unquote Green New Scam is costing Americans trillions of wasted dollars. Looking forward, over 60% of voters want Vice President Harris to continue cementing the legacy that she and President Biden have established of tackling the climate crisis head on. And finally, just to do a quick comparison back to 2020, we asked voters the same questions as we did 4 years ago. And what we found is that public opinion is remarkably stable. Just as they did in 2020, over half of voters say that they are more likely to support a presidential candidate who wants to make historic investments in 21st century sustainable infrastructure projects, create millions of new union jobs to create clean energy projects, and create an environmental justice fund to invest in the communities that have disproportionately borne the brunt of climate change and pollution. If you take anything away from this presentation as we enter these final critical few months, know that climate change remains a very important factor for voters this year. In fact, it's more important to quite a few. And the record of Vice President Harris's actions on climate change and clean energy serve a stark contrast to those of Donald Trump. And communicating Vice President Harris's record on climate change to voters, which is widely supported across party lines, is key. Thank you so much for having me.
Oops. Not ready to send you out the doors yet. Are you having a good convention? Yeah, me too. Wait, I know the slide's here, and I'm just having trouble finding it, so we're gonna just. So I'm really, really excited. I'm a big fan of our next speaker. Gina McCarthy is a career public servant in the best sense of those words. She has served in both Democratic and Republican administrations, and we're so incredibly lucky for her to have played this major role. She was the first White House National Climate Advisor, former US EPA administrator, and is absolutely, and for very good reason, one of the nation's most respected voices on climate change. Her leadership led to the most aggressive action on climate in US history, creating new jobs and unprecedented clean energy innovation and investments across the country. Her commitment to bold action across the Biden administration supported the climate and clean energy protections in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, those pieces of legislation that we really need to get the good news out about, as Danielle's presentation made really clear. So I could list a dozen different organizations she is associated with, does important work with, but I think it's easier to just say that if our movement had a rock star, it might well be Gina. She's been, and we're so glad that she's here.
I just got a standing O, so I think I'll leave. You got to get on a high note. Michelle and Council, thank you so much for inviting me today. It really lifts my spirits to be here with so many committed people who have been working their butts off. That's a technical term we all know. They're working their butts off every day to tackle climate change with the urgency that science and the future of our kids and grandchildren demand. And I applaud you for being here and the work that everyone is doing. Look, that means we not only have to accelerate the adoption of clean energy, but like Senator Markey, I must recognize that the other challenge is we have to, at the same time, phase out our dependence on fossil fuels. You can't rest on doing clean energy in hopes that it will divert it. We must take action directly to address the challenge of our time. We have to also accelerate the opportunities that we have to be both excited and proud and grateful for all of the work we've been able to accomplish together. We know we owe nothing to anybody. We have worked our butts off for months and years, and in my case, decades, and we are winning. Now is the time to grab it and run it over the finish line. Look, I couldn't be more excited and thankful about President Biden and his incredible leadership on climate change, as well as Vice President Harris's commitment to implement with everything that President Biden thought of and worked for, because he knew the challenge that we were facing. And President Biden and Kamala Harris stood up and did the job they had to do. And because of that, we are better off than we ever anticipated. So why did we succeed? Well, so far, it's been a piece of cake, right? Totally easy. No, it hasn't been. But you know what it's been about? It's been strong coalitions. That has made the difference. That is why we have to get together today, because we have to lead people who have worked tirelessly together to let them know the work they did mattered. It's coalitions that have brought everybody together at the local and state and federal levels, folks who keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because that's what it takes to make change happen. In my experience, when you build from the bottom up, then the foundation is strong and the rest comes easy. So thank you for everything that you've done. Look, I've worked at every level of government for more than 40 years. I've worked for 2 states, 6 governors, 2 presidents, and I damn well know that change is hard. But don't ever tell me that change doesn't happen. I have seen it happen with my own eyes. And while it all too often takes blood, sweat, and tears, well, that, my friend, is both the frustration and the wonder of a democracy. And that's a democracy that we have to protect. That's a democracy that we must stand up for. You know, today, because of the work of Joe Biden and others, honestly, change is afoot. We can see it, we can feel it, we can smell it. And you know, I always will and always will be an eternal optimist, because I know that hope springs eternal. I know that with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the IRA, the CHIPS and Science Act, your voices were heard. And the voices of the communities, especially those who have been left behind and disinvested in for far too long, are being heard and lifted up. That's what democracy requires. That's the work we must do together. So I want to thank you, because today we can and we must turn the threat of climate change into the biggest opportunity that our country and our world has ever imagined. Our kids, our grandchildren, our lives depend on it. So stay focused, stay hopeful, and by all means, enjoy the journey forward. Thanks very much.
Had me in tears there. Thank you. It is. Wow. So we are very fortunate to have with us today Dr. Robert Bullard, who, as I said, and truly is the father of the environmental justice movement. Dr. Bullard is the director of the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice at Texas Southern University and co-founder of the HBCU Climate Change Consortium. Yes. His 8 books include The Wrong Complexion for Protection, How the Government Response to Disaster Endangers African American Communities. He received the United Nations Environment Program Champions of the Earth Lifetime Achievement Award, and he's a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, known also as WEJAC, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, received the Time Earth Award. And I think those, we have, we had over 6,000 viewers at home on Monday. So I hope those at home and those here will join me in welcoming him. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There's something happening. I am proud to be here. My name is Robert Bullard. I'm a teacher. Seems like teachers are in style these days. I'm a scientist. I'm a scholar. I'm also a Vietnam-era Marine Corps vet. Hoorah! I'm also a climate warrior. It was more than 4 decades ago I started a journey for environmental justice before it had a name in Houston, Texas, a petropolis. The idea that some communities are not created equal. There are some that are more equal than others. And if a community happens to be poor, community of color, or physically located on the wrong side of the track, it receives less protection. That is not right, that is not fair, that is not just. Climate change is more than parts per million greenhouse gases. It's also about justice, fairness, and equity, and vulnerability and responsibility. So when we fashion policy to address climate change, we must take those issues into account. Back in 1979, environmental and climate justice was just a footnote. Today, it's a headline. I witnessed 2 signings of presidential executive orders, one in 1994 in February by President Clinton, and in April of 2023 by President Biden, another executive order. One was in the Oval Office, the other was in the Rose Garden. We're talking about 29 years apart. We have made tremendous progress, but we have a lot of work to do. The quest for justice is a race, but it's no sprint. It's a marathon relay. I know there's no such race. But you run your 26.2 miles and you pass the baton to the next generation to run that race. I've been doing this for 40 years, but we don't have 40 years when we talk about climate change, this threat to humanity. What we have to do is to build strong infrastructure, not just bridges and roads, which is great, but social infrastructure that can insulate our communities when we talk about this threat, whether it's floods, hurricanes, wildfires. Yes, in Houston we had a derecho. Now, I don't know if you know the derecho, but it's a hell of a wind came through Houston, blew out all the windows, trees down, flooding. We used to plan for disasters June through November. That's hurricane season in the Gulf Coast. But we had a winter storm, Uri, a freeze in February in 2021, which went down to 9 degrees in Houston. So we have to plan for disasters January to January. We can't let up. Our movement for justice, climate and economic justice, environmental justice, is a movement to bend this moral arc. As Dr. King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We are in the business. Our movement is to get justice, environmental justice, economic justice, food and water justice, gender justice, justice for all. It has to be our North Star. Thank you very much.
Such an honor to have people like Dr. Bullard here. I'm moved and that people are sharing their time and that you are sharing your time. Thank you. We have next an amazing panel, and then we'll be, after that, gathering for our group photo. Climate is a winning issue for Democrats, and I'm inviting the panel members to come up and join us on stage, and I think fresh water's even been put out for them. I will start with the introductions. Ning Mossberger Tang, with a high-tech background, has focused for nearly 20 years on addressing climate change through conservation and mitigation efforts, clean tech investment, policy advocacy, and organizing. She founded the 1.5 Degrees Climate Strategies Group, which is really an innovative donor collaborative, and I've witnessed the profound difference their investments can make. Lori Lotus is the executive director and co-founder of Climate Power, which works to build political will and public support for bold climate action. Lori takes on big fights, and thank you for it, and she wins them. She was one of the organizers who helped to pass the Affordable Care Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And Climate Power, I'm just gonna say personally, it's my go-to place, running an all-volunteer council, to find messaging. They put great stuff out there, great information, great graphics, and I encourage you in your organizations and for your personal use also to go there. Also to the council's website, but so we're really glad that she's here. Jane Fleming Klebb is, we've heard lots of praise, well-deserved for Jane while we've been here. Grassroots organizer, author, political strategist, nonprofit entrepreneur. Since December 2016, Jane has served as the chair of the mighty Nebraska Democratic Party, and who, by the way, made a lot of big, good noise and did a lot of good dancing last night at the convention. She has years of experience working in rural communities. If you haven't yet, get her book, Harvest the Vote. It had a profound influence on me. I've read it twice now as a person who lives in a rural area and is a farmer. We've got to keep engaging with rural communities. We've got to keep serving rural communities and remember that justice includes rural communities too. She earned the very high honor recently of the Climate Breakthrough Award, which is about the highest award you can get for working on climate change issues. She has a new project, Energy Builders, working with rural communities to bring the economic model of large-scale clean energy projects to benefit the people who live on the land. And I'm just going to say it is super, super important work. And Frank Houston, it's so good to see a fellow Michigander here. He's the Senior State Policy Manager for Michigan at the Blue-Green Alliance. This first question to Jane. So, but I'm going to encourage you to all, if you feel like it, after Jane answers, jump in and have a conversation. So, do you want to scoot over? Oh yeah, we can. Okay. Request for a slight panelist adjustment, which is good. Everyone's got a mic. Everyone's got water. We're good. We're good to go. So we know that climate and environmental justice matter to lots of voters, and it's not just young voters. So how can we use that issue to turn out the vote?
Yeah, such a good question. So, First, let me just thank Bill Forsey, who's in the audience. He's a Nebraska Dem, Jose Flores, and Senator McKinney, my good Nebraskans that came to visit and hear. When we often use the word climate, it sometimes alienates voters. And so, my advice is always to find a local issue that's impacting the land, air, and water and start connecting the dots for folks. For us, for example, in Nebraska, we're a big ag state, so we often talk about water sensors. We certainly lead with property rights, making sure that folks' property rights are protected. That not only includes farmers and ranchers on eminent domain against fossil fuel projects, but it also means tribes getting their land back to protect their sovereign rights. So we really try to connect the heart to folks' voters. Voters are voting with their gut, and they're voting with their heart. And certainly Democrats love our facts and our policy papers. But when you talk to people about protecting their homes, protecting their sense of place, and connecting that to their cultural identity, that's what we try to do, and it's very effective. In Nebraska, we started with 500 Dems elected in 2016. We have over 900 elected now. All of those wins are down ballot. So public power boards, state ledge, county commissions, and that's where the action is, right? Because on energy issues, zoning, decommissioning, eminent domain, these are all at state level. And so that would be my best advice.
Anyone else want to jump in? No? Yeah? Go on with the question? Okay. So next one I'm going to direct to Lori. What do you see as the key messages to turn out climate and environmental justice voters?
I want to build off of what Jane said, because I do think it's really important to connect with people and where they are and what they're experiencing and what that real life what they are dealing with in their day-to-day lives. And I want to start with talking about extreme weather. This is not something, the climate crisis is here. We all know that. And it is not something that's happening in the future. It is happening today. People are experiencing heat waves. They are experiencing record floods like I just did in Connecticut and was delayed in getting here. And so this is a real kitchen table issue for a lot of people now, right? Where it comes into play in how they're thinking. And we know who is affected most. We know that the frontline communities are hit first and worst. And we need to connect all of these points back to people's lives and what is driving people to vote and how they're thinking about their vote is their personal finances. Now, there's a lot more that goes into it, right? But that is what this election is really about, is the economy and what the vision is on how we deal with this economy, or deal with the economy and bring prices down. And what we see is this incredible contrast, right? There is no issue like climate change in this election where the difference is just so stark. You have one candidate, Kamala Harris, who has been fighting for clean air and clean water her entire career. She fought against big oil and got a $50 million settlement because of the pollution that big oil put in their water, right? And so that is up against someone who thinks climate change is a hoax. And he took away 125 protections for our air, our water, our land that he dismantled while president. And there is no doubt, he asked for $1 billion to enact the oil and gas agenda, that he is going to not only revoke 125, he's going to go even further. There's been 330,000 new clean energy jobs in communities all across the country, in communities in Nebraska, in communities in Georgia and Arizona and Michigan, and everywhere in between. In the Project 2025 agenda, his extreme agenda is about taking all of that away, right? It's about putting more chemicals into our air and water and taking away the jobs that are revitalizing communities and that have brought manufacturing back to the United States. So I do think this it is making that economic case, but really connecting it back to what people see and feel in their own communities, like Jane was saying.
Yeah, Frank.
I want to build on that. I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of us have a personal story or an example of how we've seen that contrast play out in our neighborhoods and our communities. For instance, myself, I grew up in Michigan, left the state for a while, and when I came back and lured my now wife from Florida up there, which bringing a Florida woman up to Michigan in the winter can sometimes be hard. But was I think even more hard and surprising to both of us than the weather was just candidly that we relocated right to Lansing, Michigan within a short jog of a major GM plant that, let's just say, was on its way down. And I think it's safe to say that when we would knock doors or when you would meet people in the community, more often than not, you're running across someone who lost their job, was on their way to losing their home often, and were hanging on by a thread to have any hope for something better in the future. So fast forward now, I can't tell you how surreal it is with this current administration and our former governor, now Secretary Granholm, to come in just about a month ago into Lansing, and we're once again at the plants that are now being revitalized and transitioning to build the vehicles of the future, to build our electric vehicles, right down the road from where there'll be a $1.7 billion just private investment in a battery plant for Ultium, and to just see that turnaround and know that how that affects workers, how that affects the community, how that affects our ability to take on climate change. And so I just think, I mean, Michelle Obama said it the best last night, right? Like, you can just see that hope is making a comeback. And it's real, and I think that's what we need to talk about. When that announcement about, you know, it's easy to say, oh, IRA bill, and they become these short little things and chip, but for the average person in a community to be able to say this complicated worded thing that's called a domestic manufacturing blah, blah, blah grant, this is what's keeping this community alive. And it's not just 700 UAW workers at one plant. It's the other small businesses, and just the feel of the community is different. So hope is back. I'll echo it.
So my name is Ning Mossberger-Tan. First, I want to thank Michelle for inviting us here today to talk about this really important issue, because I have been working on climate change since 2006. Before that, I was in the tech sector, but then I just realized that I have to do something about climate change back in 2006. And over 10 years, I realized that the most important impact I can make on climate change is to making sure that voters are engaged and we win elections, and then we can implement policies. So I think that's why the topic today is so important, you know, for all of us to talk about. I want to share that I live in Colorado. I live in Boulder, Colorado. It's a really beautiful place. I have been there since 2006, but we have experienced a few weather disasters. We had to evacuate because of flooding and because of 3 fire dangers. And one time we had to evacuate. I remember that it was a Sunday, you know, all 4 of us were in the house. We played a nice round of game, and then after that we walked to the window, and then I just saw this flame outside of the window. It's burning. It's like the trees are burning right outside the window, probably like, I don't know, 100 feet away from us. So we are like, okay, we better leave this place, right? So we had 1 minute to pack up and leave the house, make sure that we took our dog, you know, and then we took a few possessions, and that was it. And then at that moment, the police was knocking the door and said, hey, you guys better get out now. I said, all right, we are getting out. So that happened to us like 3 times. I don't know why we are not moving, but, you know, we just love the place. And I still believe that we can do all we can to prevent the worst consequences of climate change by doing this work, electoral work and policy work and engagement work of the communities, and making sure that, you know, things are going to get on the right trajectory, right? And then to prevent, you know, things like that to happen to families in the future. And we do want to stay in Colorado, and we love Boulder. So we're not going to leave, but we're just going to be there and then try to fix the problem. And I just want to address what Michelle asked earlier, like the messaging for climate. I think it's really depending on, you know, different kind of voters, right? When you talk about, for example, voters in Montana who cares about public land, and you need to talk to them about, you know, Tester, he wants to protect the public land, and then on the other side, and they want to exploit, you know, the public land for fossil fuel industry development and whatnot. So I think that resonates deeply with voters in Montana. And then when you talk about Colorado voters, a lot of us many of us care about the outdoors, right? So the outdoors industry, ski industry, the mountaineering, everything is connected with climate change. So you talk to these people and say, what do you think about the future of your favorite sport or your industry? And that would really motivate people. So I think it's really depending on like different who you want to message. And that's why the work that Climate Power is doing here is so important, because they're very data-driven, making sure that the message actually get well tested and actually resonate with the voters they're trying to reach. Thank you.
I was thinking as Neen was speaking about just how powerful personal stories are, right? I mean, compelling and scary too, but yeah, speaking from the heart and a little less wonkishly than I am personally want to do sometimes, I admit. So I guess unless anyone else wants to jump onto the messaging issue, I thought we'd move to talking about what's the best way for people to get involved and turn out climate voters. We're facing an election, and I think about this, there's the presidential, and there's also, Senate races and county commission races, and those races are incredibly important for how people experience being, governed and led by Democrats, and also just, it's important, inherently important. So any thoughts on that?
There's some like nuts and bolts tools that we all should be doing. So, for example, our party does 93 counties. That's how many we have in our state. We do voter guides for each single county that lists all the Democrats and independents that we've endorsed. So voters actually know who those people are. If you're trying to focus just on your county or even your neighborhood or your city or your small town, it doesn't even have to just be Democrats. It could be Democrats, Republicans, and independents, because there still are some Republicans who actually do support climate action, especially at the local level, and create voter guides and get those out, right? It could be something simple that you're literally printing on your home computer. But I deeply believe that we sometimes forget the basics that voters need. Right? So it's not just about getting them registered to vote, but it's making sure that they know who to vote for once they're in that ballot box or once that ballot comes to their kitchen table. And we are all about creating unlikely alliances. So whether that's farmers, ranchers, tribes, and climate advocates that we pulled together over years of intentional and trust-building work to stop the Keystone XL pipeline and many other pipelines, or now with Blue-Green Alliance type transition work, bringing together unions, farmers, ranchers, the industry to really figure out if we are going to build the next 100 years of America's energy, which obviously is going to include a lot of wind and solar, which is going to take a lot of land, mostly in rural communities. How are we doing that in a right way? How are we making sure that those are union jobs? How are we making sure that farmers and ranchers and rural communities are not being taken advantage of and that they're at the table for real community benefit agreements and dividend agreements? And I think that is where we are now. We have gotten so much smarter as a climate movement, where we are not allowing the fossil fuel corporations and the Republican Party to divide us, especially with unions and climate advocates, and really talking to voters now, how do we build this coalition? How do we build an unlikely alliance in a coalition of voters? And the best way that we can do that is start to get very concrete with voters, with voter guides, with talking to your neighbors. And that's my advice.
I want to follow up. I want to follow up on what Jane said, but going back to Frank, it's always good to quote Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
And what she said, do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if there is one thing that people take away from this convention about the next 76 days, it's to do something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we have an information problem, right? A lot of people are not getting information from traditional news outlets. They don't trust them anymore. They are trusting the person that they follow on TikTok, who is living their best life, and they're getting their information that way. And especially the younger people are, the more, in some ways, anti-news they are, and the more distrusting they are of information. It is a very big problem that none of us are going to solve in the next 76 days. However, we can talk to our friends and family. We can share information. We can get, I am a fact person. I like policy. I like facts. But the reality is, if we are just expecting that people will get the information from reading their newspaper, they don't do that, right? So how do we get to people where they are? How do we reach people through trusted sources, through trusted relationships that will actually mean something to them and sort of break through the, sort of not believing information or not believing in facts to actually resonate with them and to engage them. And so do something, even if that's just talking to friends and family or people in your community. Honestly, it's the most important thing in these final 76 days.
I totally agree with that. I think reaching out to your neighbors, your friends, your family. I help my parents, help them explain the ballot, which I think is helpful. And then also, I know some people will be happy to do phone banking, canvassing. That's super helpful. But for people who are not eager to talk to strangers, I can share something with you. Is that 4 years ago, I started an organization called the Blue Wave Postcard Movement. And we saw so much volunteer engagement this year that we are going to do more than 6 or 7 million postcards this year. And we are just reaching out to battleground state voters, and including Nebraska, actually, and try to get people registered to vote, low propensity voters registered to vote, and to sign up for vote by mail, and also inform them of the early voting time and place and all the information like that, and also send them voter guides through a QR code. So if you know people who are willing to spend a few hours in a week writing some postcards, reaching out to some battleground state voters, you can help us. You can help us do that. Just go to Blue Wave Postcards.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Frank and then just brief final thoughts. Thank you. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I think I'll echo what everyone else has said here, which is we have the most, pro-climate, pro-labor administration in the history of our nation. Yeah. And who here believes that an administration with Donald Trump would even remotely protect any of the gains we've made the last couple of years? That's got to scare the crap out of anyone who's an activist who cares about these issues. So yes, let's do something, and let's remember that we can list all the facts and figures in the world. I could talk about, we have a new report that talks about the manufacturing under Trump, where he lost 200,000 jobs. We gained over 750,000 with the current administration just in manufacturing. So there's plenty of facts and figures, and our website has a lot of them. But the passion that we bring to voters, the passion that we bring on the doors, the phones, as well as in our personal circles, that makes people want to lean in and listen. And so I'd say, yeah, let's do something. Let's go win. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final thoughts or?
I was just going to say, let's broaden our climate tent. We need to include folks that are living in rural communities, urban and suburban, making sure that we're connecting that we all are going to need energy and food, and there's ways to do that more sustainably and more inclusively. So, and get real specific. Sometimes we talk about climate action, we're so in our head. Talk about country of origin labeling and how that's going to help family farmers and ranchers, and how more family farmers and ranchers at the table means less big corporate ag, and how that helps climate. So start to get specific.
There's also a website called Give Green. I'm sure a lot of you know about that. That's where I make most of my political contributions, because that helps lift up climate candidates and making sure that climate is a top priority for them.
That was a good plug. Good green.
There you go. Can we give the panelists a big hand? Thank you so much. You all are rock stars, and I'm so lucky to know you. And all of you are too. I've seen so many amazing climate advocates here. Would you join us up front for a final group picture? Thank you for being with us today. Let's go win this, because we can't do it without all of us. And one last pitch, dncclimate.org. Please join us, get your slides, get your newsletters, stay plugged in, and help us keep this movement going.